So one of the sort of things that's been, it hasn't really been in the news that much. I've seen it here and there. The interesting thing is nobody's really making a fuss about it. And I think I know why. I think the reason is because it obviously happened before. And that is the announcement that Putin made at the latest BRICS summit. So BRICS is a couple of countries. It stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. That's the BRICS countries. And basically what happened is he said that the BRICS countries are going to start a new reserve currency. So reserve currency is obviously the currency that they all use together to basically trade with. So if there's any international transfers or anybody's buying oil or any importing goods or whatever, you have to first obviously convert your current currency into the new currency. We don't know what it's going to be called. It might be the Chinese currency, what is it, Renminbi or Renmini or something like that. Or it might be a new currency. Maybe they'll call it BRICS. I don't know. Maybe it'll be like 1 BRICS or 2 BRICS or 4 BRICS or whatever. And the reason it has been, I think the reason it hasn't really been in the media as much is because it has been mentioned before. I can't remember how long ago. I actually need to check. But quite a while back, Putin, I think he was also the one that did say that they want to do a new reserve currency. It's not the dollar, because at the moment the dollar is obviously the reserve currency. So if anybody wants to do international transfers or buy oil or import goods, you pay in dollars. So you have to convert your current currency to dollars, and then you pay dollars to, let's say, China, and then China can take that dollars and basically send you the goods. So it was almost like the currency that all currencies are measured against is the dollar. So that's why the dollar is the reserve currency. And now there's some previously the Putin obviously said this. He said, okay, cool, they're going to create a new reserve currency. And it's been a couple of years ago, and now he said it again. And I think that's why, obviously it didn't happen back then, nothing happened. They didn't create it. There's no new reserve currency. And obviously I think the reason the media has ignored this is because he obviously said it again now. But I think that there's actually a reason for that. I think they did actually try to simulate what it would be like having this currency, and they actually went sort of through the motions to sort of start creating it. And Putin and China wants this new currency to be linked to commodities. So it'll be linked to your basically the price of golds, metals, not just gold, but like commodities in general. And I think it's majority precious metals. And I think when they did it initially, they realized that if they were to create a reserve currency way back, they would have a problem because they don't own enough precious metals. But in the meantime, what they've done, if you actually look at the charts, Russia as well as China has built up their gold reserves like crazy over the past couple of years. And I think that's maybe why they didn't create the reserve currency back then. Because I think they were scared that if they do create this reserve currency, then other countries will sit on all the gold they have, and they'll suddenly be able to get this reserve currency easily. Because obviously you want the reserve currency to have quite a good value, quite a high value. So that's why you don't actually want, if the reserve currency is later linked to gold, you don't want like Russia and China to have the smallest amount of gold in the world, because then technically they don't really have a lot to back this currency up with. So I think what they did is they said, okay, cool, let's stockpile a lot of gold, and then we do have this currency that's linked to gold. We have the gold in our countries. They're safe with these countries, and other countries don't sit with all the gold. So I think that's why this time they might be a little bit more serious about actually creating this new currency. And I've sort of been running through a lot of situations and sort of tried to emulate what the world would be like if this new currency come into play. And there's there's quite a lot of very, very, very serious repercussions for this new currency. And I think the country that will basically have the most pain because of this currency would be America. And one of the reasons I think that is because obviously the whole world is running on dollars. Okay, so if you want to import cell phones from China, you pay them in dollars. So what does the Americans do? They just print more dollars. They print some dollars and hey, they can buy some phones or laptops or cars or whatever. Oil. They just print more dollars and they can buy oil. What does other countries have to do? So if you are, let's say you're a country that like Indonesia. Let's just take Indonesia for example. Indonesia, in order for them to buy anything, they need to actually have high exports. So Indonesia is actually a country that's busy really, they are growing very well economically. Their exports versus imports are really good. They are actually on a very big surplus. So they have a lot more exports than they have imports. So they're working very hard to create products that they can export. And that brings in dollars. And then they can use that same dollars to spend again to import things. So they can't print dollars. They have to work for it. So the country has to be productive. They have to produce something. So they have to work hard to earn their dollars. Whereas the Americans, they don't actually have to work hard. They can just print more dollars. And the result of that also is that there's a lot of value in America that's purely created from all these dollars. And it makes businesses very profitable. It makes the average person very, a lot more rich. What's the word? Financially more valuable. I can't think of the word now. But that's basically the consequence of having the reserve currency. And one of the big issues, I think, with America, one of the reasons they've got quite a high minimum wage. Their minimum wage is absolutely ridiculously high. It's like probably 4 or 5 times the minimum wage here in South Africa. It's probably 10 times the minimum wage in China. So you have to think, like, China produces a lot. China is one of the heaviest export countries in the world. Just the sheer amount of things they export. And what the minimum wage is there. I'm not talking about minimum wage like legal minimum wage. I'm talking about actually what people are paid. In America, a lot of companies actually abide by the minimum wage. They won't pay somebody below minimum wage. There will be some, yes, there's going to be exceptions where people are going to be like, hey, my company doesn't pay minimum wage. Yes, yours doesn't, but majority do. Like in South Africa, people don't really care here. We have a minimum wage, but everybody pays less than that, so it doesn't really matter. And the same thing goes for China and Russia and India, and people, they work for pennies a day. Whereas in America, you earn like $20 an hour. It's ridiculous how high it is. It's absolutely insane, especially if you convert it to our currencies. How much you earn per hour is insane. It's a lot of money. And I think the only reason that actually is possible is because so much dollars are constantly created. It's made the country wealthy, but it doesn't actually have to produce as much. So there's a deficit between actually how productive you are and how much money you have. There's an imbalance. But it's fine, because the whole world runs the dollar, and they were able to sort of work around it by just printing more dollars. So at the moment, we're still printing or creating, obviously, new dollars, and it hasn't stopped. They're constantly creating dollars, obviously, as the country grows. But what will happen if this new currency, let's just call it the BRICS currency, let's just call it BRICS. So the new currency, let's say the BRICS currency comes into play, it's linked to the price of gold, and nobody can. It's very difficult to create more, because you can only create more if you have more gold. So you have to mine more gold. And the whole idea of this currency, this is obviously, I'm not sure I quite believe what Putin is saying, but what Putin is saying is oh wow, this thing doesn't fall on my car. It definitely looks like it's busy falling off. Putin is saying that no single country is control of this currency like America. America is one country that's in control of the whole world's reserve currency, and which is unfair. I actually agree with Putin. That's not fair. You should never be in that position. So what Putin is saying, not one country is going to be in control of BRICS. It's going to be a whole conglomerate of countries. I mean, Saudi Arabia and Turkey apparently also wants to join BRICS. So there's going to be 7 countries in this whole thing. So what's going to happen is that I think it's going to be the inflation on this new currency will be very little. It's going to be very sticky because it's linked to actual real life assets. I mean, if you look at the price of gold to the dollar over the years, it's gone up. It's just slowly over the years gone up. It's not because gold actually got more expensive. That's not the case. It's just because the dollar lost its value. But if the new currency is linked to gold, then technically there won't be inflation. If it's actually linked to gold, there won't really be inflation. I mean, if somebody suddenly finds a massive stockpile of gold somewhere and mines it, then yes, it will obviously lose quite a bit of value, because you're suddenly going to have this massive amounts of new gold that enters the system. But the new currency is going to be very inflation proof. So what's the question then is, what's banks going to do? Big banks, even a lot of countries that's not part of BRICS, they're probably going to want to own some of this currency, because it's not, at the moment, nobody trades in gold. So gold at the moment is just a store of value. If you want to actually use that gold, you have to convert it to something, $2, and then trade with it, and then, yeah, that's how you get your value out of it. But if there's this new currency that technically is gold, but you can also trade with it, it's going to be something nice to have, especially if it sort of stands the test of time. So I think initially, a lot of banks, a lot of countries will be like, no, it's fine, we don't want BRICS. They're going to associate it with Russia, and they're going to be like, no, we don't trust it, it's Russian, we don't want it. That's going to happen initially. And initially, the value might go a bit wonky, even though it is linked to gold, just purely because people are not going to want it. And then, over time, I think maybe a year or two, obviously it's going to sort of find some footing, and it's going to start becoming popular, and it's going to start being traded with. And the more time goes by, people are going to see that it is surviving. It's not a currency that's just going to vanish into thin air. And slowly over time, banks are going to start buying it. The big banks, the world banks, the reserve banks, they're going to want to keep some of this currency because it's a nice inflation hedge. Countries are going to start buying it. But what are they going to use to buy it? If all the gold, or majority of the gold in the world, is either in Russia or China, because we don't really know how much gold is in America, because a lot of people suspect that they're lying about their reserves. You can only buy it using other currencies, and a lot of people are all going to be owning dollars, because they already own dollars, because it's a reserve currency. So people are going to be like, okay, we want some of the BRICS currency, but we have dollars. So what we'll do is, if you give us some of the BRICS currency, we'll give you dollars. And that basically means there's going to be a demand for BRICS and an oversupply for dollars. And what that's going to do is it's going to push the dollar price down. And what that's going to do is it's going to make all the imports into America more expensive. And it's going to make the difference between the exports. It's just going to basically multiply the difference between the imports and the exports in America. And that can mean, if that starts happening, and it starts turning where the BRICS currency or the dollar is going to start depreciating, that's going to be massive, like insane repercussions in America. Because what that's going to mean is they're going to have to start pushing up the exports. And salaries, I think, is going to be the first thing that's going to be hit very hard. Because you're going to have to pay people less because you have to produce more. So you're going to either say, okay, cool, I'll pay. We're going to have to produce more, so you're going to have to employ more people, but you can't pay more because you have to, because the whole ratio between what you pay and what you get is the problem. So everybody's going to have to. You can employ more people, but pay them less, or you're going to have to sort of cut current salaries but keep production the same, if that makes sense. So at the end of the day, I think there's going to be major salary cuts if this happens. And I think politically, that's going to cause a lot of instability. And hopefully, I really hope that the Fed won't decide that the right thing to do then is to print more dollars, because that'll be the wrong thing to do. Because one of the reasons why this new currency, this new reserve currency is being created is purely because America could fix their problems by printing dollars. If you look at COVID, how many countries are struggling because of the COVID pandemic? Even the euro and the pound the euro is less than the dollar now. That's basically case in point. They are struggling because if let's say you just print more euros, so you go and you say, okay, let's print 1 trillion euros. What that will do in reality is the value of the euro will just depreciate. Inflation will obviously go up in euro, and the dollar will get stronger. But if you print more dollars, the opposite doesn't happen. Inflation doesn't go up because everybody's trading in dollars. So it's a big problem for other countries, because so they can't fix their problems if there's a pandemic and everybody has to stay at home and not work. They can't just print more of their own currency to fix it. They can't do stimulus checks, although they can't print more money and use it to do stimulus checks. So if you don't have money for stimulus checks, sorry, there's no money. Whereas in America, if there's no money for stimulus checks, they just like, no worries, we'll just print some more money, and there's your money. There's stimulus checks. So as a result, America actually haven't really been affected by the pandemic. People are wealthier now than they've been before the pandemic. Whereas almost all other countries, the opposite is true. Everybody's poorer, everybody's suffering more. More businesses have closed, businesses are poorer, businesses are struggling. It's not the same. And that's why the rest of the world they're getting tired of the dollar being the reserve currency. And that's why this new currency is becoming a thing. So I think short term, in the next month, or let's say they start the currency today, I think in the next 6 months, nothing much will happen. But maybe a year, maybe 2 years in, I think there's going to be major shifts, and America's going to have some problems. I don't know how they're going to fix it, to be honest. The only thing America actually can do is they're going to have to now already see if they can stop this currency. So probably what will happen is America will go to its allies and try and ban them from holding this new currency, because they will start seeing how it's hurting them. And it's basically going to split the whole world economy into two parts. The problem is that the countries that produce most of the stuff we have in the world is China, Russia, and India. They are the big producers. Maybe not at the moment, but they are. The problem is they're all developing countries. So it's not that they are already developed. They are growing at a fast pace. I agree at the moment China is a bit of a wreck because of the monetary policies regarding margins in the housing market, but that will eventually blow over. And they also, I know that they are withholding people's money in the banks, and that's creating problems. But if you look at it from a non-emotional point of view, I think it might be the right thing to do, because if they allow people to pull their money from the banks will die, and that will have major repercussions across the whole country. So it's very difficult in a situation like that to point fingers, but yeah, that's a subject for another day. Basically, what it boils down to is that I think this new currency is going to be a major hit to America, purely because they've been printing money to solve their problems, and they won't be able to do that. If this currency becomes a real thing, they won't be able to do that, because the countries that are producing the most are the countries that's on the new reserve currency. So if you want any of that stuff, you're going to have to buy this new reserve currency. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. The rest, the only thing I can see that sort of would be a counter to that is if the rest of the worlds that are still operating in the dollar, that's not using this new currency, if they can basically start really boosting their manufacturing like insane, so they have to produce all the basic stuff. One of the big problems with Europe is farmland area. They don't have massive farmlands. They've got too many people in too small a space, so they have to import food from places like Ukraine and Russia. And it sort of makes me think why Putin actually did attack Ukraine. Maybe it is because he knows Europe is in a tight spot where it needs food. It comes from Ukraine. So if Ukraine decides they don't want the new currency, they will rather stick with the dollar, then yeah, America can just print more dollars and buy food. The euro, yeah, obviously America can print the dollars, but Europe is already on the dollar, so they can use that to buy food from the Ukraine. But if Russia can control Ukraine, control the supply of food, and say, okay, yes, you can buy food, but you have to buy it now in this new currency. Yo, that's gonna cause so much crap. It's gonna be insane. Yeah, because Europe's gonna have to buy food, and I mean, Europe gets gas from Russia, food from Ukraine. So yeah, I think that's basically the big game plan behind Putin. I think they've been planning this for long. So instead of having war with the world and taking the world, conquering the world by war, they just said, okay, let's plan it properly. Let's create our reserve currency. Let's hog the resources. Let's hog fuel. Let's hog food. We force you to buy these resources on the new currency, and then we're in control. So I think that's the big game plan for Russia. So yeah, that's basically my 2 cents on the new currency, and it is interesting that not a lot of people are talking about it, but I think the consequences of this can be massive, absolutely massive. So yeah, if you like this video, then remember to press the button. If you want to see more, then remember to subscribe. Until next time, this is Steve.